Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 0 of the Aviation Spotters Podcast. I am your host, Colin Moeser, and this is the first episode that we are doing of the Aviation Spotters Podcast. And I thought, what better way of starting it out than you get to know me, your host, Colin. So, I have a list of 7 questions, and we'll be adding questions to this list throughout the podcast. And I just want to get some things out of the way first. I don't have a professional recording studio. You might hear some background noise. I do apologize about that. This is my first time ever doing a podcast. So if you do hear some little audio, little tidbits, and all that sort of stuff, I do apologize. Just, like I said, it's my first time doing a podcast like this, actually recording anything like this. And I just want to tell you guys what the goal of this podcast is all about. This podcast is to hopefully get some traffic to these smaller photographers who take some absolutely astonishing photos, but no one sees them. You know, I go through Instagram and Facebook and all these other social media platforms, and I see these amazing photos taken by all these photographers around the world, and they don't have a lot of following. And I thought to myself, in the midst of this global pandemic that we're in, a lot of us can't go out to the airport anymore, for now at least, and take photos and interact with our friends and make new friends. And decided that's why I'm going to make this podcast, is to make the world a little bit smaller when it comes to this gargantuan global community that plane spotting is. So, without further ado, welcome to the Aviation Spotters Podcast, episode 0. For those that don't know what a plane spotter is, well, a plane spotter is a person who goes out to the airport and takes photos of airplanes. That's pretty much it. A lot of people think that spotters are out there maliciously and we're spying on people in the airport and all that. Well, that's not true. We go out there and we take photos with our friends of things that we like, which are airplanes. What might be a normal airplane or just an airplane to somebody else might be one of the rarest things that we've ever spotted or taken a picture of. There could be maybe 1 or 2 airplanes ever built that we just taken a picture of. And we also help out the local airports. We keep an eye out for our local airports, and we make sure that everything is nice and safe and secure. And if we see something that we don't think is right, we contact the proper authority and we notify the airport. So, that's what a plane spotter is. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. Plane spotting is a global culture. There are so many people around the world that do this. It is a huge, huge family. And it really does unite us, and it does cross and reaches across borders that politically you may not be able to cross, but because of this community, we can cross them, and we may have a lot of friends. And we come to locations from around the world and we get to interact with each other. So, without further ado, let's run through the questions and you guys get to know about me, your host, a little bit more. So I have 7 questions that are set up for this podcast, and we're going to run through all those, and those are going to be the base questions of what I am going to be asking on this podcast. So, question number 1, tell us about yourself. Elaborate where you're from, how you got into spotting, how many years you've done it, and what is your home airport? What is the airport you first went spotting to? So, I was born here in Boise, Idaho, and I got into spotting in 2011. And that weekend, I remember in May, we had these fighter jets flying over our house. We have a lot of air traffic that comes over our house because we are on one of the approach lines for BOI. So I went down to the airport that day. I grabbed my dad's Pentax K100D, and I went down there, and I was lucky enough to get a couple fighter jets taxiing in front of me. At the time, I didn't know what they were. You know, I really couldn't tell the difference between an F-18 and an F-15. Well, I kind of could have, but you know, this is for analogy reasons. And then a couple years later, I went back and I realized that was Marine Squadron VMFAT 101, the sharpshooters. And there were 4 different Marine squadrons there on that FBO with 16 different Hornets. And that was really cool to rediscover. That was my first day of plane spotting in 2011, so I've done it for 9 years. My home airport is Boise, Boise Airport, Gowan Field, BOI, and that's where I've grown up spotting. I was spotted at the satellite airports here in the valley, Caldwell and Nampa, but mainly Boise. Boise's my number one. So question number 2 I'll be asking my guests is, what type of camera do you have? What do you currently use? Do you have any other camera gear that you've previously used that's worth a mention? So for me, I just upgraded recently in the past couple months to the Canon 5D Mark IV with their 100 to 400 millimeter lens. I recently just got this setup. Since 2011 up until February of this year, I was a Pentax user. I used the Pentax K100D, the K30, and the K3. In 2013, when I graduated high school, my parents got me as a graduation present my Pentax K30. And I was just using the standard 55 to 200 or 50 to 200, whatever it is, up until later on that year when I bought the Sigma 70 to 300. I'm going, wow, this is a great lens. And then I discovered a 100 to 500, and I'm going, I need that lens. So save some money up, and I bought that lens. Then I realized 150 millimeters isn't the right for me. And then I discovered the 50 to 500 millimeter lens that Sigma makes. And I'm going, I really need that one. So I sold the 150 and I got the 500. And that was the lens I have used ever since. I've been using that lens for 5-6 years now. And then Christmas 2015, I upgraded to the Pentax K3. And I used the K3 so hard, and then the lens wasn't the best build quality, and unfortunately it actually broke my internals of my K3. It would have been too expensive to repair what the camera was worth. So I had to go back to the K30 with the 50 to 500, and then in February I upgraded to the Canon 5D Mark IV. It's between a Nikon D850 and a Canon 5D, and I am in love with my 5D. It really has done leaps and bounds for me in my photography. But I have to give a shout out to Pentax. Thank you. I wouldn't be where I am today. Simple as that. Question 3: what's your favorite airport to spot at, and what's your favorite airplane to spot? So why is this airport a favorite to you? What's the gist of it? Why do you like spotting there? And why do you like spotting that aircraft? So for me, my favorite airport to spot at is Boise. I love spotting at Boise. We get a lot of different traffic. We get a lot of biz jets, a lot of military, and a lot of cool civilian airliners too, believe it or not. And my favorite airplane to spot is, of course, the A-10 Warthog. Those who follow me on my social media platforms know that I do a post called Warthog Wednesday. And it's the one day dedicated of the week where I get to post an A-10 shot. And I grew up with the A-10. I was born here in 95, and in 96, the F-4 Phantom was retired from the Idaho Air Guard, and the A-10 started its mission here. So I grew up with the A-10. I've watched them fly my whole entire life out here, and I can go down to the airport with nothing coming in, and I know I can go spot an A-10. There are days when I just need to get out of the house, I need to go spotting, and I'll go down just to take a couple pictures of the A-10s I've got hundreds of photos of. But it never gets old for me. It still gives me that feeling of this is why I love spotting. It's just the A-10, seeing those airplanes every day in my life pretty much. So that's why I like going out to spot the A-10. That's why it's my favorite airplane to spot. Now, question number 5 is, what's your least favorite airplane to spot? Why is that? Well, for me, my least favorite airplane to spot is the CRJ 200 and the CRJs in general. I mean, that's all we got in Boise besides the Q400s. The Q400s that come in here have special paints and stuff on them, and they're always interesting to shoot. But man, those CRJs, they just get, that's what always comes in here the past 15 years. I've flown on them out of here, and they just get really boring to spot. Not a big fan of the CRJ. So, now, question number 5. What is your favorite airplane to spot? Why is it your favorite? Have you ever seen it? Have you ever spotted it? My favorite airplane is the Avro CF-105 Aero. I come from a family of Canadians, and that aircraft for me is my favorite aircraft after researching it and realizing what that aircraft was about. The Avro Aero was a delta wing design and was an aircraft to intercept Soviet bombers coming over the poles back in the 1950s. And it would have been one of the fastest aircraft ever built. They rated that aircraft in the mid to late 1950s as a Mach 2 plus aircraft, which was unheard of almost at the time. The Aero was canceled in 1959 or 1958 because it was rendered obsolete by the new intercontinental ballistic missiles. But that didn't deter Avro engineers from going over to Europe and over to NASA. Avro Canada engineers who designed the Aero designed Concorde and designed the Lunar Excursion Module, or the LEM, for the Apollo missions. The Avro Aero is still a folklore in Canadian aviation culture, and I am actually lucky enough to own an original Avro technical drawing of that aircraft. And I actually had my great-great-uncle work for Orenda, the Orenda Iroquois, which would have powered the Aero and all Canadian aircraft. So, that's why it's my favorite aircraft. Now, my favorite civilian aircraft is the Boeing 727, and I flew on the 727 as kids. And I just absolutely love that aircraft, that commercial aircraft. So, now number 6. Tell us a spotting story. Something interesting that happened, or what was funny, something scary, or whatnot. Just sometimes you're spotting and something interesting happened. Well, for me, I never really get bothered at Boise spotting. And one day, all of a sudden, someone decided to call the cops on me because they thought I was doing something suspicious. So here comes Boise police. They get out. I'm going, oh boy, here we go. And I get out, and they get out, and they come over, and they say, license, registration, what are you doing, all that sort of stuff. And then the officer says, you're an aviation nerd, aren't you? I'm going, yeah, how did you know? He said, well, I saw the Lycoming sticker on the back of your car. I was going, oh, okay. So I chat with the officers for a second. They do their stuff, and they just went on their way. Nothing too interesting and all that, but I thought it was pretty funny that, he saw that Lycoming sticker on the back of my car. Question number 7. The wrap-up questions. Where can we find your work? Do you have a Flickr? Do you have an Instagram, Facebook, Twitter? Do you upload to airliners.net or jetphotos.net? For me, I have a Flickr, CJ Moeser. I also upload to Airliners and Jet Photos under CJ Moeser. And my Instagram and Twitter are BOI Spotter. That's what I'll be doing. The main posting for this podcast is off my own personal social media handles. We might do dedicated Aviation Spotters Podcast social media channels. I know for sure there will be a Facebook page up here soon. Maybe a website. We'll see. We'll see about that if this gets big enough to do a website, which I hope it does. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at BOI Spotter, Flickr, Flickr, Airliners, and Jet Photos under CJ Moeser. And the other part of this question is tips, words of encouragement, anything else my guests want to add to the listener. And for me is don't ever give up. To all you young spotters out there, or spotters who are trying to get followers or upload to airliners.net and Jet Photos that keep getting their photos rejected, don't ever give up. I spent a full year trying to get my first photo on airliners.net, and I went on to their aviation photography forums, and I met some amazing people that really helped me with my editing and my camera setup and all this other stuff that really, really help me out. And I meet a lot of people that, they want these really high quality photos and they get really bummed out about taking a photo that they don't think is good enough. Well, to those people who think that way, your photos are amazing. Your photos are excellent, no matter what anybody else says. They are your work. You should always be proud of your work, even if it may be backlit or a little bit blurry. I have a lot of those photos and I'm really proud of them. So don't let anybody get you down about that. Always regard your work in the highest level possible. And never, ever take a photo for somebody else to please other people. I, a couple years ago, got into the mistake of taking photos for airliners and for jet photos, trying to please other people. And I realized that's not the way I want to do it. I want to take photos for myself. My social media is for people who want to, and I like sharing my work. I don't do it for followers or for money or anything like that. That's why I'm doing this podcast. I want people to enjoy my photos, and if you like them, awesome. Thank you so much for your support. But if you don't, I understand. And that's the same thing with this podcast. So, those are my main questions I'll be asking my guests. And we might add some more. Who knows? We might take some of them away. I want your feedback on this. So, shoot me a DM at my Twitter or at my Instagram at BOISpotter. Let me know how you guys like this. Let me know what you want to take away or even add. And I also need your guys' help. Like I said at the beginning of the show, this is for those people who want to get their name out there. And I want to get their name out there too. I want to help them with this. So I have an email, avspotterspodcast@gmail.com, AVSPOTTERS podcast@gmail.com. I need you guys to email me profiles of people who you think deserve to be on this podcast and who should be shouted out to the world. Send me a quick couple sentences of why you think they should and their profile or how I can see their work. I need your help on that. So please email me those profiles and we'll get to that. For now, I want to have a couple bigger name guests on here just so we can get the word out about this podcast, so they can share on their media channels. And I hope that you learn something from them and we all can get to know each other a little bit more. I also have to say a huge thank you to everybody who's helped me to get to this point. My dad, Jeff, my best friend Matt, my girlfriend Ashley, my friend Lucas. Thank you guys so much. And another special shout out to James and Nate over at Full Disc Aviation for really helping me out with this. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for getting me to this point of recording episode 0. And I hope you guys enjoy this podcast as much as I do recording this. And I really hope we can make something out of this. So keep those cameras ready and those batteries charged, and we'll catch you next time here on the Aviation Spotters Podcast.